Hello, thank you so much. Pleasure and an honor to honestly be invited to talk to you folks. I do like questions, as my wife Katie will tell you. I am dull, but I do answer questions well. So I'll start talking about international business and what I see for the outcome. First thing I got to say is these are the opinions of Chad Carney. These are not 3M opinions. I have to say that. My lawyers make me say that. So this is the opinion of me based on what I do for 3M, not the opinion of 3M. So if I get off any topic here, just know that for a fact. So what do I expect for the, yes sir?
I have a question.
Yes sir.
How have you handled being a customer of Frank's for 20 years?
It's been tough. The one thing I will say is even when I was in China for 3 years, I did mail him my haircut fee every month, even if I didn't get it. So yeah, I got his check. So no, but it's great. Honestly, I'm a upstate New Yorker by origin, so I moved to Minnesota. My wife is a native Minnesota. She's from Mankato. So when I moved here, one of the first things my father always told me is the two hardest things you have to find are a barber and a dry cleaner. And I found my barber, and I get nervous every time I see him because he's not getting any younger. But the point is, I think it's 22 or 23 years that I've been getting the haircut with Frank, and grateful for his friendship and his conversation every time I see him. So he yells at me a lot, but I put up with it. Outlook for 2025. I don't think we're going to see a ton of change. So as everybody probably knows, we had an administration change. So we've got a new administration coming in. In 2024, you saw a lot of U.S. businesses kind of holding on what we call CapEx. So that's investment in equipment and money and people and things of that nature. The reason being is just it was an unsure time. We didn't know whether regulations was going to go one way or another way, whether the banking rules were going to go one way or another way, or whether the overall business environment was going to go one way or another way. I think you're going to see that loosen up. If you look at the majority of predictors for next year, they're all saying about a few hundred basis points below what we did this year. So this year we finished up at about, a few percentage points below. I'm talking in accounting ease. We're going to finish up with all estimates somewhere just below 3 for our GDP growth in the US this year. 2.8, 2.85, things of that nature. Right now the consensus is about 2.5. I think that's a little low. I think we'll probably do about exactly what we did this year, and the reason being is because I think there'll be more capital investment this year. Now, that could all be derailed by things that the new administration could or could not do depending on what we're going to see. So the first thing I'll talk about is tariffs. Do I expect to see tariffs coming in? It depends. I think this is a bargaining chip, especially with how wide they've gone with the tariffs. We're talking about tariffs on China, we're talking about tariffs on Canada, we're talking about tariffs on Mexico. China is one thing. I can totally see the current administration and a lot of people wanting to kind of impose tariffs on China. Canada and North America and Mexico, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Those are really good trading partners. We actually need their economies to function really, really well for us to do well. They buy a lot of our goods. They're a good partner for us, and it would be real harmful. And let me be clear, tariffs on China will be harmful as well because we get a ton of our material from there. Whether that be raw materials, whether that be components, whether that be finished goods, we get a lot of our material from China. The only thing that I'm going to say, and again, Chad Carney's opinion, is places where I could see tariffs being in place is places where it's very clear that the Chinese economy is trying to get a monopoly. So if we look at EV batteries and EVs, that'd be a place where I could see tariffs. The only problem is we've got to put tariffs on the big boys here in the US as well. If we do that, we cannot give Tesla an open market space by keeping everything out. So if we're going to put tariffs on China, fantastic. Those tariffs should absolutely drive right back into investing in other EV vehicle manufacturers so that we don't have a monopoly. And again, we do not have to look far in our history to see this exact same thing. Chinese government tried to do this with steel and a bunch of other things where they were dumping into other economies, the Europe, United States market for a very, very long time. Because one thing that you'll learn if you live in China for a few years, or if you go to China as often as you do, sir, is they are playing a 100-year game. They do not change administrations every 4 years. They do not care about paying the price for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. What they're looking for is to secure themselves for 150, 160 years. So the point is, if they say, hey, I've got to struggle through eating it, getting bad margins on my steel for the next 15 years, the government will absolutely subsidize those businesses to make sure they drive other manufacturers out. And that's what we saw. We saw the U.S. steel production go to almost zero, right? We're talking right now about the largest remaining U.S. steel manufacturer being bought by a Japanese company. And the issue is because the labor rates that we have here and combined with their, I would say, just desire to monopolize the market, it gets such a harsh environment that local manufacturers can't compete. So that's one thing I would be worried about. EV is EV not only for, and remember, when I say EV, I'm going to get broader here and just talk about battery and battery storage, because it's not just EVs. That's what we know today. That's the near term for most of us. A lot of us is maybe buying an EV vehicle, or you already have one. The next kind of thing is going to be power storage. So if you look at where the next generation is going, it's it's batteries that are house size. So I do not doubt in the next 10 years or so, a lot of us will have a house battery on the side of our house. And that'll do us a lot of things for us. One is it's the same thing as a generator. It could run our house for maybe a week or 2 weeks or a month even, but it's also going to allow us to purchase energy at a very low cost. So if we think about it right now, Excel doesn't do a ton of this, but has anybody here recently bought an EV, electric vehicle? Okay. Did you get your charging station from Excel?
You know what, that would have been a better question for maybe my spouse.
So just so you know, if you buy an EV, a lot of the EV manufacturers want to sell you their charging station, which is fine. But Excel is now putting out a program where they say, if you buy it from us, we'll come and we'll install it for a very low rate, and you get a very reduced rate on that energy. The reason is because they only want you charging your car at night. So what they do is they install a separate monitor. I think it's like $200, $250. It's not expensive compared to what you buy it from a manufacturer. And what they will do is they'll say, go ahead and plug your car in when you get home. We only turn that meter on at about 11:30, 12:30 at night when our power draw is lowest. So they're charging you pennies on the dollar for charging that vehicle because you're charging it at the right time for them. So that's what we're going to see. If they would do that with everything, I would already have a house battery and I'd be buying all my energy at night. I'd be using it during the day and then resupplying that battery at night. So I think that's all coming. And the same thing goes for businesses and corporations and things of that nature. We're all going to be a little bit worried about the power grid from now on. So critical industries and things of that nature, labs, things of that nature that have testing going on, we're all going to have large batteries outside our facilities.
Can you comment a little bit more about the power grid and what concerns?
Yeah, so the question is, can I comment a little bit more about the power grid? It's bad actors. Cybersecurity. So there was another one just recently that we caught. There's a lot of bad actors out there who want to do us harm. And they don't want to do us harm because they don't like you or me or things of that nature. They're looking for a strategic advantage. So if our power grid goes down, it's things that they can take advantage of. We'd struggle with manufacturing, our costs would go up, our stability would go down, things of that nature. And I would hate to tell you, but so one of my jobs was working in the municipal environment with the water infrastructure. Our infrastructure is terrible. If you look at, and I encourage all of you to go out and look, the Corps of Engineers puts out a report card every year for all of our different components, whether that's water, whether that's wastewater, whether that's electricity, whether that's the roads, bridges. You guys have all seen the news stories on the bridges and how bad they are. That's a fraction. That's the stuff we can see. The stuff under the ground is 10 times worse than the stuff above the ground. If we look at the tranches of when water was installed, now I'm not speaking about Oakdale, or the larger area. But if we look at the tranches of when most water was installed, it was World War II. Pre-World War II and then just post-World War II. So that's ductile iron pipes. They have a usable life of 50 years. So that's where we're sitting right now. So that's one of the places, so that's one of the things, the infrastructure bill that the Congress passed a while back is something that we need. We probably need that times 10 to keep us up to speed. We don't think about water because it can be handled and it can be remedied. The power grid is something that cripples us. So if the power grid goes down, and we saw that, and that's one of the things I'll head back towards international business. The one thing that we're going to see continuing to drive forward is not only the changing of supply chains, but the information involved in supply chains. For a lot of years, corporations were outsourcing things and their supply chains got longer and longer and longer, and they didn't know it. They were just saying, yep, these guys supply me, and now it's going out because it was going to third party and fourth party and things of that nature. There was an event in 2021 called Winter Storm Uri. Anybody remember that one? So that was the winter storm that blew through the south. So Texas, Louisiana, and Texas froze. The power grid in Texas shut down. More importantly for me and my business was, and your dad's business, was all the chemical manufacturers in the US were blown apart. So you had facilities, not only the power grid, but you had oil refineries, you had chemical refineries, you had chemical producers that had systems designed for warm weather climate. Well, when it froze, just like the power grid, you had burst pipes, you had things. It took us 2 years to recover from that. And that is directly related to how we make money. So the point is the immediate thing we started doing is saying, okay, where do we go to get stability in this? I want to know where this material comes from. I want to know what their liabilities are. I want to know what the risks associated with that are. And I want to make sure I've got not only one, but 2 or 3 or 4 other alternatives if that one goes down. That's what everyone is doing with China right now. Now, when Donald Trump said the first thing about tariffs, I think it was within a week, there was a sneaker company that came out and said, we've just changed everything. We no longer buy from China, we buy from Malaysia, we buy from the Philippines, we buy from India. That's fine. A sneaker company can probably do that in a matter of weeks. Companies like 3M, companies like other companies can't do that. And I'll give you a great example of that. If you tried to buy a bicycle in the pandemic, couldn't get it, right? And does anybody know why you couldn't get it? Because all that stuff is made in Taiwan. All your gears, all your shifters, all your derailleurs, everything is made in Taiwan. It was highly focused, and nobody cared because they were the best at it, they were the cheapest at it, they got the best tech, they did the best investing, and the point is Taiwan shut down completely. Factories were shut down, and even if the factories were open, you couldn't get anything out of Taiwan. So what happened to bicycle prices? It went through the roof because they couldn't get one. So there was 45 people going in for one bike. Well, what happens? That $100 bike is now $750 because people are going to pay for it. That's my biggest concern with tariffs as well. That's what's going to happen. I think there's a fallacy that people think that, oh, well, if I knock out the China manufacturing, US manufacturing will just take it up and they'll charge the same price. It's not how supply side economics works or demand side economics works. What will happen is they'll say, great, I'll supply more, but I'll supply it at the same price I'm supplying it at, because that way it improves my profit margin. The other thing people don't think about is CapEx. So capital is what we use to invest in our company. If I can make 100 units today and my Chinese competitor makes 450 units today, and all of a sudden they can't get their product in, I can't just turn my machine up in most cases and make 450 more units. I have to buy a new line, I might have to buy a new factory. At the very minimum, I have to get additional labor. That takes time and that takes a lot of money. And the issue is unlike China, who's working on a 100-year plan, our administrations change every 4 years. So if I'm a company and it takes me 2 years to build a plant and it costs me $40 million to build that plant, I don't know if I'm gonna have this luxury of that additional demand that China can't service when the administration changes. So I might build a new factory, but in a lot of cases I won't. In a lot of cases, I'll just drive my factory as fast as I could. I'll make as much as I can. I'll still charge the premium price, and I'll be making money hand over fist.
I'm curious what your thoughts are when the dock workers are striking and they're demanding that no automation be used, because they're worried about losing jobs.
Yep. So the question was my thoughts on dock workers striking and saying no automation can be used. It's quixotic. It's Don Quixote. You're tilting at windmills. Automation is coming. It's the way we get productivity up. We started this process in 1970, right? So this isn't something new where automation is making jobs obsolete and going on. That started in 1970. Take a look at the automotive manufacturers. If I took you to a GM plant today, you'd be astounded at how few people are sitting on that line. There's almost none. And the point is that's just the way we have to work. Remember, the way a GDP grows is mostly through productivity. We can invent new things, but it's through productivity. It's not through us kind of creating new markets. If anything, we've outsourced most of our manufacturing, and we're becoming service-oriented, which is less and less human involved and more computer involved. You had a question as well?
Yeah, I did. Speaking about that labor shortage issue,
Yep.
in the school district this year for the first time, we actually started sponsoring H-1B visas. I'm curious to hear from that perspective what your lens is on that conversation. I noticed, it's interesting how that thing has been swaying as you watch the news between Trump's view on it and Elon Musk's opinion, and then all of a sudden, we're all watching to see where that's going to land.
I gotta be careful here.
Well, and honestly, I think it's a fair question. There is a labor shortage, and I think especially skilled labor and that kind of thing. But I didn't know from your perspective.
Totally agree with you. So the question was on H-1B visas and should we be encouraging that or discouraging that? I'm going to talk about tech. Let's not talk about schools for just a second. Let's talk about tech. If you listen to Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and things of that nature, they'll say two really negative things towards us. They'll say we don't have enough engineers, and if we wanted to, we couldn't develop enough engineers. That's not the case. We can develop all the engineers we want. We could have the best engineers in the world. The point is they are bringing in low-cost talent that makes those jobs unattainable for somebody. I'll give you a great example. If I live in India and I go get my engineering degree, I can probably do that relatively easily with the cost of education in India and how it's paid for. Here in the U.S., you're talking about $250,000 worth of debt. So if I'm only paying my engineers $70,000 or $80,000, there's no one that's going to be dumb enough to go, yeah, I'm going to go pay $250,000 for engineering school only to do that. If I were in charge of this administration, I'd say, no, you really need to tune up that H-1B visa to say it's something that no one in the U.S. can do or nothing we can invest in. If anything, I'd be going to the Googles of the world, the NVIDIAs of the world, and saying, hey, listen, why don't you guys start scholarships? Why don't you guys invest in us creating our own engineers? We have the best schools in the world. People send their kids here all the time to get these educations. The point is the school has become too expensive for US people. And the point is there's not enough kids willing to spend $250,000 in education to get a $60,000 a year job. So I'd be going the opposite way with H-1B visas. I'd say, hey, listen, the corporation's got to pay a ton of money for those people to come in. Just make it so that it's on parity, so that a U.S. engineer who has to pay $250,000 can actually make a living compared to what the company is willing to pay someone from India or Asia or something along those lines. I know that's a hot button topic, and there's a lot of great people that I know and work with every day that were here on H-1B visas and things of that nature. There's a need for it, no question. But for us to make that a free-for-all, I think is a tremendous mistake, and I think all we're doing then is just outsourcing that capability outside of the United States.
I'll just say this, like, we don't have a strong feeling either way. This is the first time we even dabbled in it, but I agree with you, like, the more we can make these jobs attainable for our own, we're all this grow your own, even for us in high school, we're trying to get kids into these career pathways, but it's interesting. I'm just curious from the different industry perspectives, for sure.
I might not be having my corporate hat on right now, but I have my mother was a teacher, my sister was a teacher, my niece is a teacher, and my nephew is a teacher. And I will tell you right now, the thing that I've always fought for, and it's astounded me, if I look at, and we have police here, police, firemen, and teachers should be the people we pay the highest, and we pay them the least often.
Yeah.
So the point is if anything, the H-1B is a hot button issue for me to say we need to be investing in our schools. It's an absolute tragedy that our country rates in the 30s for education globally. It's a tragedy. Shouldn't be happening. Now we can talk about, do we need the Department of Education? Do we need this? Do we need? I don't care. Let's put our smartest people to work on it and figure it out, because there are people being underserved at a really, really high cost. So. Questions? Okay. I will also, so my job today also, one of the things I'll maybe talk your fears down about is my job today is the Respiratory Protection Division. So 3M is one of the leaders globally in respiratory protection, everything from the N95 masks, which you're all familiar with from the pandemic, all the way through to some of our PAPR stuff that goes into nuclear sites and things of that nature. Because of that, I talk to the government quite a bit. Because of that, I talk to epidemiologists quite a bit. So I'll tell you, a lot of questions are coming up to me directly now about the new avian influenza and the concerns about that, some of the reporting that's going out. That's not a concern for you right now. I will tell you that's one of the things that we're seeing it transmit from birds to cows, and everybody freaks out because those aren't the same species. The answer is it's a very specific cause. It's typically coming from the Texas cattle fields, and that's because the Texas cattle fields are outside. So that means their feed is outside, that means their troughs are outside, that means their water tanks are outside and things of that nature. So their ability to contract avian influenza is actually happening simply because they have more birds hanging around them all the time. So it's very likely an ill bird got sick and either was in the food bank or is in the water trough or possibly sitting on the back of the cow, and that's how transmission happened. If we look at all the human cases, it's direct contact right now. So it has not gone airborne. It's not changing from person to person yet. So that's really a low effect. I know I try to keep people calm about this stuff. If I'm worried about anything, it's RSV. RSV seems to be spiking right at the moment. Everybody be careful, wash your hands, wear a mask if you have a fragile immune system and when you're out in public, because those things are happening right now. We've got a little bit of a confluence of spike of the H1B or the flu. COVID is spiking a little bit back. It's a much milder version of COVID, but also RSV. So be a little cautious there if you can. And then the other one too is the norovirus. So you've heard a lot of news about that, about the norovirus. It's really bad. It's a really bad 3-day flu. Both sides of you are in trouble. That is that is spread by fecal matter. It is not respiratory, so washing your hands there is everything. I will tell you, if you get it in your house, it's likely everybody's going to get it because it's almost impossible to keep your house that clean. But the number one thing is just wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. The way that works is you touch something, and then you touch your eyes, you touch your mouth, you eat something, and that's how you're going to get that stuff. So totally different. You don't need to be wearing a respirator to help yourself with the norovirus. All right. Questions? Any other topic you guys want to talk about? We were talking over here. Oh.
Actually, with the RSV and flu stuff, what is, we haven't developed anything to help protect us against those?
So we are in we're in a preventative measure. So personal protection equipment is what we're focused on. We sold off of our Solventum is what used to be 3M Healthcare. They are working on disinfectants, quaternary disinfectants, and a whole bunch of new forms of that. So yes, but it's primarily focused on hospital situations and things of that nature. For personal use, I would say use your hand sanitizer, wear a respirator if you're sick, wear a respirator if you know you're around people sick. And let me be real clear here. There's a difference between a respirator and a mask. Okay, so a respirator is something that has a tight seal, which means it has to have some kind of conformable nose. It also has to have ear loops that go behind your head. So you've seen the ear loops that go, or the loops that go behind your ear. That's a KN95. That's not an official N95 respirator. It's something that came in from Korea simply because we needed the demand for it. But if you're looking for a good respirator, it's got to have a couple things. It's got to have a tight seal around your face. It's got to fit you well. It's got to have a nose bridge, and it's got to have loops that go around your head. So a mask is of no value. And here's why I'll tell you why, is the only way, especially with something like COVID or RSV, they're respiratory diseases. That means you breathe it in. So if you do not have a seal on your face, you're not helping yourself at all. There's no value. So if you're out, see people out there with the old doctor mask, the hospital mask with the big gapes on the side, it's not helping you. You need a full seal around your face. So.
Yep.
I had a question, maybe a comment. I think that one of the problems we have is that the cost of higher education has gone way beyond inflation every year for like the last 20 years. And I think we need to get under control of that. And not every engineer needs to go to MIT or Holman, because my old school is $10,000 or a little bit more a year, and they crank out top-notch engineers.
Yeah, agreed. The comment was around the cost of education skyrocketing past inflation and things of that nature. It's totally true. I think there's been advantages taken of that simply because it was a branding opportunity. The thing that upsets me right now is if you look at the endowment for Harvard, they could never charge tuition again and be fine. That's a true statement. They could never charge tuition again, keep the same class sizes forever, and never run out of money. That's how much money they have. So if I look at my school, private school, but in the Midwest, smaller school, a lot of Minnesota kids go there, $17,000 a year, I think, and that was an expensive school. I look now, it's in the 40s. So I have 3 kids that are heading that direction. I'm a little worried about that. I don't see that changing anytime soon, simply because they don't have to. So.
Obviously, this is domestic, but speak to the rising healthcare costs, especially medications, health insurance, how that's affecting us.
Yeah, so so the question was about healthcare costs, rising healthcare costs, and how it's affecting us. It's going to continue to affect us because of lobbying. So I mean, I can get political here for a second, but I've been campaigning for things like tort reform in our legal systems and healthcare reform and that kind of stuff. The people that make these decisions are in those industries, and if they're not in those industries, they're getting millions of dollars towards their campaign funding. So I hate to say it, I'm not gloom and doom, but I don't see that changing anytime soon. We saw the unfortunate incident with a local person, which was a tragedy in New York. He was about to walk in and say that they had increased profits from $22 billion to $30 billion. So if an insurance company is going from $22 billion, that's not revenue, right? That's profits. So they made $30 billion in profits. Now, they're one of the largest, so that's okay. But the point is when you have people going into bankruptcy because of healthcare debt, it's become a problem. Do I think we're anywhere near there? No. The other thing, too, I read an article about this morning. I encourage you all to read it. I'll find it and maybe send it to Frank. The government option had another incredible increase in usage, right? So that shouldn't have happened. So when they did the Affordable Care Act and they gave the government and state plans, it was supposed to be this big jump up for people who didn't have insurance or people that were struggling with insurance, but it was supposed to plateau. So this year they expected it to be down, and it was up almost as much as it was last year. So that goes to show you that there's people that have need for those insurance support programs, and there's people that also have need for just a simplified version, and I think it is a little bit more simplified than trying to do it on your own. Yes, sir.
Anything you're most proud of from your career?
Anything I'm most proud of from my career? The people that I've developed, that's it. So right now I have an organization I have 12 direct reports, an organization of direct reporting that's about 30, but I work in an organization that's close to 1,000. So for me, I've long passed the individual contributor, and now I'm the developer and strategic guy. So that's it. To see some of the people that have not only come up at 3M, that have continued to flower and go outside of 3M, it's fantastic. That's the thing to me, and actually I had 2 meetings this morning just on people with helping them do career planning and that kind of stuff. It's one of the things that I'm trying to bring 3M. 3M is a big corporation. Corporations tend to be cold. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is make sure that people know that there's investment in people. That's the one thing that I've seen, and I've worked with millions of different companies. Worked in 60 different countries. The people that invest, the companies that invest in their people will succeed regardless. Highs, lows, bad economies, good economies, those people will succeed, because the one thing that I keep telling people in my company is you need the people that go the extra mile. And if I'm transactional with you, there's no way you're coming in on Saturday and doing the extra work. There's no way you're making the extra phone call before you leave. There's no way you're putting the extra time and effort in. I'm just going to do what I get paid for, and I'm going to go home. So that's the way. Yes, sir.
Not sure if you can comment on the buildings that are continually going away at the 3M campus. Are there people left?
Yeah. There's a lot of people left. So a couple of things. Remember, we sold Solventum. So Solventum was about 1/3 of our company. So that moved away. I would say the buildings that you're seeing coming down are lab buildings that had gone way past their lifespan. So there's a lot of requirements, both EPA requirements, health and safety requirements. So a lot of those buildings were replaced with other buildings that we have on site. But some of them were it was just too expensive to maintain that building. So the point was, as it comes down and we build other lab buildings. So do I expect more buildings to come down? Yeah. We don't have the size or space space needs that we have anymore, but I expect us to kind of maintain that site. I wouldn't be surprised if we have plans in place already to build another laboratory building, just like the new one that we built on the corner there across from the Wells Fargo, to replace some of the stuff that we lost. But yeah, we have excess capacity at the moment. And again, those lab buildings, so right along that row, those were the first 3 buildings built on campus. So they were managed as long as they could possibly be managed, but some of them just had to come down.
And is Solventum still on site, or did they move now to Egan?
So Solventum has a contract to be on site. So just for those of you that don't know 3M very well, the side towards 94 is kind of the industrial side, and the side all the way on the other side, there's 2 kind of blocks of campus. That northern block was the healthcare block. There's still people there, but yes, they have that contract will end, I believe, at the end of this year. And they just built, or they're in contract to build that's mainly a laboratory facility. So what I was told, I don't know it a ton, I don't know it perfectly, but I was told is that it was only going to be laboratory space. It won't be business offices. So I don't know if they're going to try to maintain some business offices on the current 3M campus, if they'll find another building, or if they'll completely diversify. I know the CEO there has. Okay, I know the CEO there has said that he wants to have a more diversified approach he doesn't believe in one headquarter location. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see eventually contract for build in Texas, Florida, some places like that. I expect them to maintain a heavy presence in Minnesota, especially with laboratory, because those people are not transferable that easily. But I expect them to probably pop up other locations to be a little bit more diversified than 3M was originally. Yes, sir?
Yeah, how does 3M plan to interact with the Gold Line? There's a station right off.
Yep. I have no idea. I'll be brutally honest with you. It's amazing that it's right there. Will people drive? Will people use the bus line? I would hope so. It doesn't help me. I'm over in Lake Elmo, but it might get me a little bit closer. I'm sure we'll encourage everyone to use that as much as we possibly can. But like I said, we built a brand new parking structure before the pandemic, so we've got plenty of parking spots. So I'm hoping they use it, but yeah, there's a lot of parking spots. So. Any other questions? Go ahead.
In the name of like energy efficiency conversions within your facilities, in addition to the previous topic of EV and electric, what do you know and what can you say about waste management and recycling?
So very proud of that. 3M uses 100% renewable energy. That contract was signed with Excel, I believe, 3 years ago. So we are now we pay extra for our energy to make sure it comes from renewable sources. So we're spending on that. 3M, I can't speak to it 100%, but the goal is to be zero landfill at all our facilities. I believe most of our facilities are already there, but I couldn't speak to 100% of them just because there's so many businesses at 3M. I'm not sure what they do, but I know the goal is we've got a new CEO. He's reinforcing that zero landfill. He's reinforcing that energy conservation, and especially water conservation. Manufacturing takes up a lot of water and uses it, so 3M is really advanced in trying to clean that water, return it to its natural environment. Or if we can't, then we basically contain it and use it over and over and over again ourselves. So 100% zero water. And then also the big thing that Bill has put in place is zero injuries. We've had some really bad incidents in our plants over the past 5 or 6 years. Most of those were traceable to somebody making a really bad decision, not anything systemic. But Bill's answer to that is, I don't care. So the answer is fix it, because I will not go in front of a family again and tell them that something terrible happened to their employee, to their family member. Okay, last question.
I have to ask.
Yes, sir.
You're a tall man. Do you have any concerns with the fact that Frank seems to be getting shorter?
He's cutting your hair.
I think we need to lower the chair like a good 1.5 feet, because he's struggling to reach the top and he yells at me quite a bit. So I will talk about, since I did come from international business and since I do focus on China quite a bit, I will come back to China. I think people are worried about China as the big enemy and that kind of stuff. China's a lot more fragile than we are right now. Their economy is a lot more fragile than ours. And by the way, I'll just say that I said at the beginning of the conversation, we were going to head towards somewhere between 2.5 and 2.8 for next year. That is way better than the rest of the globe. Europe is searching for 1%. Latin America is close to 2%, but that's because they're still redeveloping and coming back. If you look at most of Asia, it's in that 1.5%. China is listed at 4.9 for next year. You can never believe those numbers because it's integrated with highways they build and airports they build and cars that they build to put in parking lots in Chongqing. So I don't trust that at all. But I will tell you right now, we saw from their economic or their real estate bubble burst, they're in rough shape. And they need us probably more than we need them. The number one thing that we give to China, we talk about exports going back and forth, and we could talk about the trade imbalance. It's not really that imbalanced. We use them for what we need them for. They buy a tremendous amount from us. We import all the tech to them. So if we were to shut them off tomorrow, they would be in great trouble because they don't develop their own tech as well as we do. The speed at which we do it, the variety of the technologies that we bring forth, it all comes from us still. So be proud of that. America is still the center of excellence for technology. We were just talking about this. I was at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, until last night. The technology that they're demonstrating there is amazing. AI has fears for me as well as great hopes for us. But the point is that the technology is again and again coming from the United States, and we're inventing things that are going to make our lives that much easier every day. So.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
China is harassing Taiwan to no end. What is their point? What is their goal? And what could happen there?
So I'm going to give you a slight history lesson. Taiwan was its own land before. So China was always China. Remember, China was not usually China. There was a bunch of different communities living in China. They didn't really come together until like the 50s under Mao. Mandarin, by the way, just so you know, was not a language. It was an invented language so that people could share a common language across China, and that again was invented in the 50s. And it's very funny because if you go to Shanghai, you take someone from Shanghai to Shenzhen, they can speak Shanghainese, which is their dialect, that the person in Shenzhen will go, I have no idea what they're talking about. Now to you and I, it sounds like they should because the sounds and languages and cadence are pretty similar, but they have no concept of one another. So Taiwan was its own and had native people on it. When the Communist Revolution came and Mao took over, Chiang Kai-shek was the leader at the time, he moved to Taiwan and created the People's Republic of China. So they're still mad about that because they view that as, well, that's China because it was started, now to tell you the truth, it was never China. Chinese people invaded that country and eventually took it over. It's not going to happen. So my doomsday prediction is it's not going to happen. If China invades Taiwan, the entire globe would line up against it. Not just the US, not just the UK, everyone. Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, everyone. Why? Because one is we get so much out of Taiwan. So if you don't know, 95% of the new chips that we need to run everything come out of Taiwan. 95%. The US makes like 40% of the global chip supply, but nothing of the high tech that we need nowadays. The chips that we make are basically garbage. So we've invested in the CHIPS Act, and what do we've got? We've got 2 promises from Intel to build new chip factories, and 1 promise from Samsung to build new chip factories. Those are 4 and 5 years away before we get any kind of output out of that, and it won't come close to helping us. So if everybody, and again, Europe gets their chips from Taiwan, Africa gets their chips from Taiwan, everyone gets their chips from Taiwan. So if they were to invade Taiwan, the entire globe would line up against them. Do I rule it out? No, for one specific reason. China's a totalitarian regime, right? It's a party that runs that organization. If their economy goes south, they'd be looking for something to distract. So that would be the thing. So I don't think that's the case. If you do a lot of research on China, it's a very, very small group of people that manage a whole lot of people. Those people are very, very happy right now because it's like us from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? Everything's getting better. My dad only had 1 car, I have 2 cars. My parents had a 400 square foot house, I have a 1,000 square foot house. So everybody's happy, there's no reason to challenge the status quo, but we saw what happened in Hong Kong, right? And that was that regime coming in and saying, you people that have had different freedoms over time, we want to take those back from you. And we saw tremendous revolts. They did not want to be part of that regime. If the local people in China feel that same way, like you're doing harm to me rather than good, that would be a big problem for a very small group of people. And again, we think that people don't know. There was a great thing shown to me by the State Department years ago, and it showed internet access, and there was little points of light, and you saw these massive plumes of light over the US, massive plumes of light over these big cities, over Europe and that kind of stuff, and China was just this big black mass. And I'm like, so no, nobody's accessing the global internet from China? And they said, hold on, now let's look at, shoot, I'm thinking of the name, VPN. So what VPN is a virtual private network, which means it hides where I'm coming from. They said, let's look at VPN usage. The rest of the world went almost dark, and China went to this huge heat bloom. So all they do is they just hide where they're coming from so that the government can't do it. And I will give you my personal experience. When I was in China, I lived in a group, in an area that was populated by some expats, and you went there and you had to load a VPN, virtual private network, onto all your devices so that you could get to things like CNN and Facebook and all those type of things. Otherwise you couldn't, it was blocked. Well, the Chinese government is attacking those, so every 6 or 7 months or so, all of a sudden your VPN wouldn't work anymore. So then you'd send out an email to everybody that you know, hey, whose VPN still works? Oh, mine does. So then you'd go buy that VPN, and that would work for another 6 months, and then it would crash again. And then everybody like, oh, hey, the one that went down is working again. They changed their code. So you just basically round robin back to these VPNs so that you could get to things that you wanted to get to. And another great story about that, I was talking to my father. I was in Shanghai. He's here. He's like, hey, look at this story on CNN. Do you have it on? And I turned on, we're both watching CNN. And he's like, what are you seeing? And I'm like, a black screen. And he goes, what do you mean? And I'm like, yeah, if they don't block CNN. They just turn it off when they don't want you to hear something that you want to hear. So, so it's pretty crazy fun. But thank you so much. Thank you.